Hello and welcome to my UROS 2021 presentation. The title of my research project was Quantifying the Ambiguity in Mathematical Word Problems in French and English. I hope you enjoy. The inspiration for our research project came from this paper. This paper sorted mathematical word problems into two categories, cardinal and ordinal, and the paper's claim was that cardinal problems were tackled differently by their subjects than ordinal problems, and there were traps that people could fall into when thinking about a cardinal problem that meant they were less successful. We read through the paper, myself and the others collaborating on this project, and found that we disagreed with some of their final conclusions, and we felt that the ambiguity in the cardinal problems versus ordinal problems was higher. We didn't have a way to show that it was higher. We could just tell by reading this bit is ambiguous, that bit's ambiguous. And while we could say on an individual basis by looking at individual questions, this is ambiguous, that's not, we didn't have a way to quantify it or show, oh, this one's 2 times more ambiguous. So that was the inspiration and sort of motivation behind the project. This is an example of 2 of the questions that were given to the subjects. And while cardinal and ordinal is a way that they divided them, what I'd like you to look at is the information that they're giving. When you look at the ordinal problem, if you remove the first 2 lines, the problem still remains the same. That information is implied in the 3rd line that he was taking classes. Whereas if you look at the first problem, Paul has a certain amount of red marbles. After that first line, you could assume one of 2 things. Paul only has red marbles, or Paul has red marbles and another type of marble. When you get to the 2nd line, the first scenario of no other marbles is ruled out. So after the 2nd line, it could be red, blue, and other, or just red and blue. The 3rd line fails to rule out the possibility of Paul having another colour of marble. So when it's revealed that Jolene has green marbles, there is no information in the cardinal problem which rules out the possibility of Paul having green marbles. This is just one of the sources of ambiguity, and where we think experts being asked, is this problem solvable, may take a little bit longer to think, do they mean to leave out this part of information about the green marbles? Is that intentional? We think it's carelessness on the writing of the questions, but this problem on the left-hand side is identified as solvable. However, if you assume that Paul has green marbles, it's no longer solvable. So we performed these trees looking at where the source of ambiguity is. And from these trees, we could pinpoint points where you have a branch splitting off. And one of the questions we asked ourselves during the project was, do we evaluate the entropy after this first branch? Do we evaluate it after the second branch? In the end, we settled on evaluating the problem as a whole and working on the probability of reaching the endpoints of each of the branches, as some of the branches are cut off by information further along, and it is kind of assumed that you would read the whole question and then attempt it. So we came up with this formula for evaluating the intrinsic ambiguity of the problem. You can see on the right chart that you have just a plot of what this formula does between 0 and 1, the range of probabilities. And here we evaluated for the cardinals, and you can see that amongst the cardinals you even have variation in ambiguity, and that some problems are more so than less. One of the motivations for producing a model that can quantify ambiguity in word problems is to level the playing field in exams which use word-based problems. Currently, if you have someone studying an exam in their second language, they might not be as perceptive of certain ambiguities than someone who's studying in their first language. The same can be said for people who may be thinking a different way, such as dyslexic people. if we were able to produce a model which is applicable across multiple word problems, or even across just English prose text, it would mean that when something is ambiguous, it could be flagged and it could then be addressed, rather than some students struggling more than others. Because when there's an error in a paper, everyone has to navigate around this error. When you have something that's open to interpretation, some students may be more negatively disadvantaged than others. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I hope you found it interesting.